I'm going to channel this. You have changed the relationship to your mind. You are becoming an adept in Mercury. You, you didn't just study Mercury. You went above and beyond and studied Uranus. And I'm not saying like you actually went and studied Uranus. I'm saying that there's a relationship between the two planets. Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury. So you've studied like you're a master of information here in this realm. Like you're studied. Like I'm proud of you. Like I don't know if you read the Torah, but if you don't read the Torah, you're at least someone who's able to comprehend, and you read information and you take in information equivalent at the level of Torah. That's why you're watching this right now. But if not, it's like you just you really have this higher wisdom. You're studied in the Akashic realms, not just here. You're an old soul. Just starting to remember who you actually are, because here in this world, you are slipping through the radar. But in the astral realm, you're a big deal. And you know this. You know this. In this lifetime, you're just being modest because you've dealt with people. And when you showed your intellect and your intuition and your gifts, people didn't like it because people don't understand the relationship that they have between the physical and the spiritual. Everybody's thinking that like, oh, I'm just here. They're getting pulled into, the distractions, the never-ending distractions of the material world. But do they really go in and realize that there's this whole other side to the equation, that you could tap in to the celestial, the astral, the the higher realms? There's so many of them. I'm getting the feeling that like you're way up there, like approaching ascended master level. Like this is, I'm getting the vibe, it's like when you get your doctorate. Like when you get your doctorate, you go and you create a thesis, or you do something to show your work, like what you've learned and what you've created out of all the time that you spent studying and learning and growing and evolving. And that's what this life and this season particularly is about. This is about going as deep as you can into your subconscious, into your personal lineage as a soul, and saying like, yeah, I did this, I learned this 72,000 years ago, I did this, and that's all still in your memory. But it's like the intuition of the collective consciousness, because when you get to this level, right, like say a person who has at least in its general energy based off of the linear timeline that their soul is traveling on. Think like North Node and South Node. Say like in their past, in their recent past lives, they have not been doing the work. It's like, everybody has intuition, but someone who has been developing that type of karma is only going to have, that level of intuition. But someone who's been, I want to say, relentless in their spiritual path, not just for this lifetime or like a couple lifetimes before this, but like you've just been on this path, because what we're doing is we are spirit that is manifesting into matter to have an experience in duality when we're truly just in infinity, right? And the more that you alchemize and explore duality, then that is exactly what allows you to get to the point to where you get archetypal mastery. That's what you get. Wow. And then we got the Hangman on the bottom of the deck. So we got Pisces and Neptune. So this is Sophia. Sophia this is Gnostic thought. But we're using the tarot, right? We just talked about the Torah. This is how deep this gets. This is not going to be like grounded in reality. So forgive me if this is not your reading, Gemini. Like you'll realize, like if you haven't already realized at this point, this is crazy. So we're entering the age of the divine feminine. We're going from the divine masculine to the divine feminine. I talked about this earlier. We're going through this 400-year cycle where it was all about, in the past, the sacrifice of the self for the structure of society, so that we could build the structure of society so that everything could be stable and, real Saturnian energy. But now we're entering, this is the great change. This is why the New Agers call it the New Earth. The Chinese call it the Great Change. The West calls it the Age of Aquarius. And, these are multiple cycles saying the same exact thing. But now we're in this era where the self is what you should be giving energy to. Not from, like, a satanic point of view, meaning like self over everything, but like no, the self extends way past you, right? Because everything is consciousness. You are all that is. So the way that you treat others is ultimately how you're treating yourself. And that's the lesson of Sophia. So Sophia, you got to think of it as like there was primordial creation, just like all that is just is what it is, and it just always was and always will be. But part of that manifestation was Sophia. It's like a daughter to Source. It's the Shekinah in Kabbalah. It's Binah, the divine feminine boundary principle that is the gateway between Source and all that is. And the thing is that Sophia felt as if she could not create the way that she wanted to create. She felt as if she didn't truly have free will, and she created her own universe. And when this happens, as they say, you break natural law, because there are just laws to the universe. And you cannot go outside of all that is, because all that is already is. It always existed and always will. But if we're truly in an infinite universe, then we would be able to go off and completely start from scratch. Whole new universes with light and word. And she did that. And when she did that, she gave birth to what became the Christian God, Yahweh. But in this version of the story, the Gnostics tell that Yahweh was not the creator of the universe, that it was a creation of the universe. But because it was made in the image of God, it believed that it was God because it had nothing outside of itself to reflect upon the hierarchy of being, because it was in its own universe. It created its own universe. And when it believed that it became God, it became power hungry. It's, again, the ultimate form of serving the self. I am God. I will create whatever it is that I want to create, regardless of if it's in alignment with natural law. And I'm not saying like this is good or bad. Who knows what's good or bad at this point. Some of the worst things that have ever happened ended up turning out good for certain people or humanity. And some of the best things that people thought were happening ended up becoming the worst thing to ever happen to them. But I digress. The story then goes on to morph into Judaism and Islam and Christianity and Islam. And this is why a lot of people actually have a grievance with Christianity, even though it's no different than any of the other mysteries, right? There's 13 people sitting here. There's the sun and then the 12 zodiac signs. But most people look at this and see a religious story that they don't understand. And throw the baby out with the bathwater. But it's understandable at the same time. Everything has its polarity and everything has its boundary. What am I getting at here? The divine feminine had been lost for a long time until throughout this whole story, right? Yahweh created Earth, and then he created Adam and Lilith originally. And then what happened with that. Then Eve came into the picture. Adam and Eve sinned, ate from the tree of good and evil. Again, what is the theme of this? How do you know what is good or bad? When you are eating from an opinion about life, taking in people's opinions, having a rigid opinion about just what is, because it is what it is, right? I am that I am. But the thing is that when this lineage started, I'm talking about the human race from the biblical perspective, in just a short time after Adam and Eve, Enoch was born. And although he was born in a lineage, a family, a world that he was told was a manifestation of a sin, meaning that they missed the mark, that they knew which direction they were supposed to go, exactly what source was aligning them to. But they chose to eat from the tree of good and evil instead of the tree of life, because life just is what it is. It gives you everything that you could ever want or need or imagine. But it's your opinion about that is what causes suffering. But Enoch didn't allow that to happen. He spent time paying attention to what was going on with people, what was going on with spirit, with the Watchers. He learned from the Watchers. Although the Watchers even had trouble with overcoming their freaking minds over their passions, and went out and took on human wives, not just female brides, but a codependence to the material world. And Enoch transcended that because he walked with God. He saw what God was manifesting. He listened and he studied the stars and the way of the universe. And he walked with God so long that he was taken to heaven without dying. He ascended. He went from non-physical to physical. He built his Merkaba. He built his light body. And ascended the archangels, became little Yahweh Katan, and Kabbalah. And they had to remove this story from the Bible. Because if you could find out how Enoch ascended, you'll tap all the way back to Sophia. And if you tap all the way back to Sophia, you'll tap all the way back to Source. Why do you think that in Taoism it's called yin and yang? In the West here, we are obsessed with the masculine. So masculine always comes before feminine. Yahweh, or little Yahweh, Metatron, recorrected the sin that its creator committed within its original creation, that it then took out as a projection on its creation and punished for being flawed in the way that it created it in itself. And that is what Sophia allows you to tap back into. I just pulled 2 cards for you, and that's what came out of this, because Sophia showed up. Sophia is like a sudden burst of wisdom that changes your entire life. And you can't ever go back to the way that things were before Sophia came into your life. Because when you get all the way back to the source is when you tap into the template of reality and you let go of all mental control here as a physical person, because you tap all the way back into the deepest wisdom that you could possibly tap into. And that's beautiful. I don't think I'm going to go into the I Ching for you, because that was a lot. We went past the I Ching. We went past 3,000 years ago, when the world is, working with something that was fully developed only in the past couple hundred years. We have access to something that has an unbroken lineage for 5,000 years. But it doesn't matter what the ancestors left us. We are always tuned into wisdom. Because wisdom comes from within. It's what we're made out of. Love and light.